The night was colder than usual in the small town of Silver Pines. A crisp wind howled through the streets as Ethan Carter locked up his small bookstore for the night. He pulled his coat tighter around himself and began his usual walk home. The sky above was unusually clear, revealing an ocean of stars twinkling against the void. He had always been fascinated by space, but he never imagined it would come knocking on his doorstep. As he turned onto his street, a strange noise caught his attention, a soft, whimpering sound, barely audible over the wind. His eyes darted around the dimly lit neighborhood until they settled on something that made his heart clench. A woman, frail and trembling, crouched beside his porch steps. Her arms were wrapped around a bundle, shielding it from the cold. Even from a distance, Ethan could tell she wasn't human. Her skin had a faint blue hue, and her silver eyes glowed dimly in the dark. Her dark hair, tangled and matted, clung to her face. She was clearly exhausted, barely holding herself up. Ethan hesitated, instinct battling caution. She was alien, there was no doubt about that. But she was also a mother, protecting something precious. Slowly, he approached. "Hey, are you okay?" The woman flinched but didn't move away. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words came out in a series of weak, clicking sounds. Then she coughed, and Ethan saw something dark stain her lips. Blood. His gaze shifted to the bundle in her arms. A tiny face, barely visible in the folds of fabric, peeked out. The baby's eyes were enormous, a deep, endless black. It wasn't crying, but it was breathing, chest rising and falling in shallow motions. Ethan knelt. "You need help. Both of you." The alien woman stared at him for a long moment, her silver eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite understand. Then, with the last of her strength, she held the baby out toward him. He barely had time to react before she collapsed completely. Adrenaline surged through his veins. He scooped the baby up carefully, then checked her pulse. It was weak, but she was alive. Ethan didn't think. He carried them both inside. The next few hours were a blur of panic, care, and uncertainty. He wrapped the mother in blankets, trying to warm her up while checking for any visible injuries. The baby, surprisingly, was quiet, watching him with unnerving intelligence. He prepared a makeshift bed for the child, all while trying to figure out what to do next. The mother woke near dawn. Her breathing was weak, her limbs still trembling. She tried to sit up, but Ethan gently stopped her. "You need to rest," he said softly. "You're safe here." She stared at him, then at her baby, who lay curled up in a nest of blankets nearby. Slowly, something in her posture relaxed. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest and spoke, this time in a soft, accented whisper. "Eliara." Ethan blinked, realizing she was introducing herself. He smiled. "Ethan." He gestured toward the child. "And them?" A ghost of a smile flickered across her lips. "Liaran. Liaran." The tiny being that had been left in his care. A child who had no idea how close they had come to disaster. Eliara's gaze turned pleading. "Help." Ethan exhaled. He had no idea what he was getting into, but there was only one answer he could give. Yes. Days turned to weeks. Eliara's condition improved with food, rest, and warmth. She was hesitant at first, still weak and wary, but over time, she allowed Ethan to care for her and Liaran. Ethan learned that they were refugees. Eliara's people had been at war, their home destroyed. She had fled with nothing but her child, chased through the stars until her ship failed. Crashing onto Earth had been an accident, and she had wandered, hiding, too weak to continue, until she had found his house. She had planned to leave Liaran and disappear. She had been prepared to die. Ethan refused to let that happen. He worked tirelessly, gathering food, medicine, and whatever he could to make their stay comfortable. He even managed to find a way to communicate better, piecing together fragments of her language while she learned his. And through it all, Lyaran grew stronger. The baby was unlike any human child, unnaturally quiet, yet incredibly perceptive. He responded to both Ethan and Elyra, bonding with them as if he understood they were his family now. One night, as Ethan rocked Lyaran to sleep, Elyra watched with an expression he couldn't quite place. She had been growing bolder, more open. He no longer saw fear in her eyes, only gratitude. "You, kind," she said softly. Ethan smiled, tucking Lyaran into his makeshift crib. "I just did what anyone should do." Elyra hesitated before shaking her head. "No. Many would not." He knew she was right. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that she and her child were safe. As the stars twinkled outside, Elyra placed a hand over his. Her touch was warm, her silver eyes filled with something new. For the first time in a long while, she had hope. And so did he.